Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're totally decoding the real economics behind renting a semi-truck. We've got a fantastic, completely transparent, real-world breakdown from an independent driver who just made the leap into a lease rental. If you've ever sat there and wondered what it truly costs to be your own boss out on the highway, well, you're in the right place. We're going to break down the raw numbers, uncover the hidden fees, and honestly look at the physical toll it takes to keep those wheels turning. So let's start with those massive, flashy numbers you always see. Recruiters absolutely love throwing these out there to lure company drivers into independent contracting. You know the pitch. Hey, you can make 10 grand a week, right? It's the kind of number that makes you want to hand in your notice today, pack a bag, and hit the open road. But as we're about to see, that massive gross number is doing some serious heavy lifting to hide the actual reality of the business. Look, stepping away from a super safe, reliable 65 cents a mile as a company driver to jump into a lease rental, it promises a much larger slice of the pie. You absolutely see way more of the gross revenue. But man, it completely changes the game. Why? Because suddenly you are the one absorbing a massive amount of personal and financial liability. Which brings us to Section 1, the avalanche of deductions. As an independent contractor, you're immediately hit with this rapid-fire list of weekly expenses. We're talking fuel, IFTA taxes, insurance, your electronic logging device, a pretty steep 15-cent per mile maintenance fee, trailer fees, heck, even dispatching fees. When you're a company driver, all this stuff just happens invisibly in the background. But in the lease rental, you literally are the company. And these costs just eat right away at your check before you've even poured your first cup of coffee. Let's actually put some hard numbers to this, just to give you some perspective. Just to rent the rig, a Ryder truck in this specific case, you are looking at a flat fee of around $1,000 every single week. It's kind of like paying rent on a luxury Manhattan apartment, but just for the privilege of turning the ignition key. Then, of course, comes the fuel. And fuel is easily the most volatile expense out there. For our driver's weekly run, fuel hit $2,000. And get this, here's the absolute kicker. That is only because the driver had access to a company discount card. Without that discount, running a full week from Monday to Sunday would have cost him $2,500 in fuel alone. That is a massive $500 difference right out of pocket. Moving on to Section 2, gross versus net profit. Now, to prove these aren't just made-up numbers, our source literally pulled over to a safe spot to show us a live, time-stamped pay stub from April 2025. You know, in an industry that is just flooded with social media myths and influencers inflating their wealth online, having this real-time, undeniable documentation cuts right through all that noise. So let's do the actual math from that pay stub. For this real week on the road, the driver generated an amazing $9,500 gross load. That's knocking right on the door of that $10,000 myth we talked about. But wait until you see the deductions. That gross gets completely chopped down by $4,000 to cover the fuel, the truck rental, and all those other fees we mentioned. So at the end of the day, it leaves a much more realistic net profit of around $3,000 to $4,000. All right, let's look at Section 3, contracts, loads, and logistics. Let's walk through a real, everyday scenario our driver faced. Step 1, the rented Ryder truck breaks down. Step 2, he has to go over to a facility and physically swap all his gear, his ELD, and his cameras into a brand new truck. Now, it only takes about an hour, not too bad, right? But then comes Step 3. Because dispatchers are running super tight contracted loads and they literally can't take chances on a delay, that load is immediately given to another driver. Which leads to Step 4. Our driver is now totally empty and forced to deadhead. If you're not familiar, deadheading means driving without paying freight, and he's doing it entirely at his own expense. The financial impact of just a simple 1-hour delay is honestly staggering. It cost our driver a $500 short run from Arizona over to California. So instead of getting paid to move 5 hours west, he had to burn his own expensive fuel just to reposition the truck. It's a perfect, albeit harsh, lesson in how incredibly fast profit evaporates when the wheels stop turning. It's a massive reality check for anyone thinking of jumping into the independent contracting side of this gig economy. So what is the secret to actually surviving this? Well, our source highly recommends mail loads. Why? Because the mail runs relentlessly. Through Christmas, through standard holidays, and yep, even through global pandemics, those loads are contracted and they are moving. Look, if you're paying $1,000 a week just to rent the truck, you absolutely cannot afford to sit at a truck stop for 4 hours waiting for some dispatcher to find you freight.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 4, Health Before Wealth.
This whole business reveals a stark contrast in driving styles. On one hand, you have what our source calls the AA battery approach. That's a driver who just runs relentlessly, chasing a potential $12,000 week until they're drained. But then you have the sustainable approach. Our source? He's perfectly happy taking home a lower, reliable net profit because he prioritizes pulling over for a 3-hour nap when his body actually tells him it needs it. And honestly, it all comes down to this core philosophy. As our source brilliantly points out, I'ma always put my life first, my health first, my sleep first. It is so incredibly easy to get blinded by the hustle culture of chasing gross revenue, trying to run like a machine just to offset those massive deductions. But guys, no amount of money is worth swerving on the highway because of severe sleep deprivation. Which brings us to the end of our breakdown today and leaves us with one truly fascinating question to ponder. Knowing the reality of those $4,000 weekly deductions, the intense stress of breakdowns, and the sheer exhaustion of the road, is the allure of that massive $10,000 gross check actually worth the heavy financial liabilities and the intense physical toll required to achieve it? It's a question every single prospective independent driver has to answer for themselves. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember,